Tari's gleaming Mercedes-Benz glided silently through the grand gates of his Abuja mansion, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. His shoulders, tense from a week of high-stakes meetings in Lagos, ached beneath his custom-tailored senator suit. The house loomed ahead, a modernist masterpiece of glass and steel that had graced the covers of architectural magazines, yet had felt more like a mausoleum than a home since Zainab's passing 2 years ago. He expected the usual silence that greeted him on his returns, the hollow echo of his footsteps, the mechanical hum of the air conditioning, and the distant sound of Malam Jibril, their long-serving houseman, quietly attending to some forgotten corner. But today was different. The sound hit him first, a high-pitched squeal of delight that made him freeze mid-step. Laughter. His daughter's laughter. A sound so rare these days that he had almost forgotten its melody. For a moment, he thought he was hallucinating from jet lag. Then he saw them by the infinity pool that overlooked the Abuja skyline. A scene unfolded that seemed to belong in someone else's life. Aisha, his 6-year-old daughter, was splashing in the shallow end, her dark curls bouncing with each movement. But it wasn't his daughter's presence that stopped him in his tracks. It was the woman with her. Hawa Garba, the new housekeeper he'd hired through his executive staffing agency, was sitting at the pool's edge, her feet dangling in the water. She wore a simple Ankara sundress, its vibrant yellow fabric bright against her dark skin, and her natural hair was pulled back in a practical bun. What struck him wasn't her appearance, though. It was the way she interacted with Aisha. "Miss Hawa, make it higher," Aisha called out, watching in delight as Hawa created waves with her feet, sending ripples of water toward the little girl. "Ready for the tsunami?" Hawa's voice carried across the water, warm and playful. "Here it comes." Aisha's shriek of joy echoed off the glass walls of the house as a small wave of water splashed over her. The sound pierced something in Tari's chest, a tight knot he hadn't even realized was there. "Daddy?" Aisha spotted him first, her face lighting up in a way he hadn't seen in months. She scrambled out of the pool, leaving wet footprints on the marble tiles as she ran toward him. Tari instinctively stepped back, not wanting his suit to get wet, then stopped himself. When was the last time his daughter had run to him like this? He knelt down, opening his arms. Designer suit be damned. Aisha crashed into him, soaking his jacket, but he found himself not caring. She smelled of chlorine and the strawberry shampoo Zainab used to buy her, and suddenly his throat felt tight. "Mr. Tari." Hawa had stood up quickly, looking mortified. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't expect you back until evening. I should have had Aisha dressed and ready for dinner. She grabbed a towel, hurrying over. "Aisha, honey, you're getting your father all wet." Tari should have been annoyed. The house rules were clear. No swimming without scheduled supervision, no outdoor activities after 4 p.m., no disruption to Aisha's carefully planned routine. Everything in his life ran according to schedule, from his investment meetings to his daughter's Quran lessons. But watching Aisha's face glow with happiness, seeing the easy way she turned to include Hawa in their conversation, he found himself saying something unexpected. "It's fine, Miss Hawa. Actually, it's nice." Hawa's relief was visible, but there was something else in her expression, a flash of guilt, perhaps. She busied herself, wrapping Aisha in a fluffy white towel, her movements gentle and practiced. "We made cookies too, Daddy," Aisha announced, bouncing on her toes. "Real ones, from scratch. Miss Hawa taught me how to measure the flour and everything. Can we show him?" The last question was directed at Hawa, and Tari noticed how naturally his daughter looked to the housekeeper for approval. "They should be cool enough now," Hawa said, then quickly added, "unless you'd prefer to stick to Aisha's usual dinner schedule. Mr. Tari?" Tari looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Hawa. The setting sun caught her profile, highlighting the elegant line of her neck, the warmth in her brown eyes. She was nothing like Zainab, with her coolly efficient manner and strict adherence to schedules. Hawa radiated something else entirely, a natural warmth that seemed to have thawed something in his frozen household. "I think we can make an exception today," he found himself saying. "Lead the way, Aisha." As they walked toward the house, Tari noticed small changes everywhere. A vase of fresh hibiscus flowers on the patio table, the subtle scent of vanilla and spices wafting from the kitchen, colored drawings taped to the windows, something Zainab would never have allowed. In the kitchen, Aisha proudly showed him a plate of chocolate chip cookies, slightly misshapen but smelling divine. As she chatted excitedly about her baking adventure, Tari watched Hawa move around his kitchen with easy familiarity. She had changed something fundamental in this space, transformed it from a showcase of expensive appliances into something that actually felt like a home. "Would you like coffee with your cookie, Mr. Tari?" Hawa asked, already reaching for his preferred cup, dark blue ceramic, a gift from Aisha last Christmas that he rarely used. "Tari," he said suddenly, surprising himself. "You can call me Tari." Their eyes met over Aisha's head, and for a moment something electric passed between them. Hawa's smile faltered slightly, a shadow passing over her features so quickly he might have imagined it. "Tari," she repeated softly, then turned away to prepare the coffee. He watched her, noting the grace in her movements, the way she seemed to anticipate needs before they were expressed. There was a story there, he realized, behind her perfect references and impressive qualifications. Something deeper that explained how she had managed to bring laughter back into his house in just a few short weeks. As the evening sun painted his kitchen in shades of gold, Tari felt something shift inside him. The careful walls he'd built around his life after Zainab's death didn't seem quite so necessary anymore. And that, he realized with a mix of excitement and terror, might be the most dangerous thing of all. Looking at Hawa as she helped Aisha arrange cookies on a plate, her head bent close to his daughter as they discussed the perfect presentation, Tari knew he should maintain his distance. She was an employee, after all, and he had learned the hard way that mixing business with pleasure only led to complications. But watching them together, hearing his daughter's laughter ring through the house that had been silent for so long, he wondered if some complications might be worth the risk. What he couldn't know, was that Hawa was harboring a secret that would test that newfound openness in ways he couldn't imagine. As she turned to hand him his coffee, their fingers brushing briefly, she pushed down the guilt that threatened to overwhelm her. For now, she told herself, this moment was enough. The rest would have to wait. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Tari mansion's kitchen, casting prism-like patterns across the marble countertops. Hawa stood at the island, methodically chopping fresh mangoes for Aisha's breakfast, trying to ignore the weight of her phone in her pocket. 3 missed calls from her mother this morning. She knew what they meant. Kabiru had asked for her again. The sound of expensive leather shoes against hardwood pulled her from her thoughts. Tari entered the kitchen, his presence immediately filling the space. Today's senator's suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to his athletic frame. He carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding rooms full of investors. But there was something different about him this morning. A softness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Good morning, Mr. Tari." Hawa corrected herself, still adjusting to his request for informality. "Coffee's ready. I noticed you prefer it stronger on Wednesday mornings." He paused in the act of reaching for his cup. "You noticed that?" "I notice things," she said simply, turning back to the mangoes. It was easier than meeting his gaze, easier than acknowledging how much she'd come to observe about him in the past weeks. The way he always loosened his kaftan 2 notches when reading bedtime stories to Aisha, how he unconsciously touched his wedding ring when stressed, the slight furrow in his brow when he was trying not to smile. "Daddy!" Aisha's voice rang out as she bounded into the kitchen, already dressed in her private school uniform. "Miss Hawa is teaching me Hausa today!" Tari raised an eyebrow, looking between them. "Hausa? Just breakfast-related words," Hawa explained, sliding a plate of heart-shaped masa toward Aisha. "I thought it might make mornings more interesting. Plus, your daughter's quite the linguist." "Nafia ruwa sai anjima," Aisha declared proudly, pointing at the mangoes. A smile tugged at Tari's lips, one of those rare, genuine ones that transformed his whole face. "Zainab would have approved," he said softly, then seemed to catch himself. The mention of his late wife hung in the air for a moment, heavy with unspoken grief. Hawa busied herself with wiping down the counter, giving him space to collect himself. She'd learned that too, when to push and when to retreat. It was a dance she was becoming increasingly familiar with, this careful navigation of the Tari family's healing process. "Miss Hawa makes everything fun," Aisha continued, oblivious to the emotional undertow in the room. Yesterday she showed me how to make paper cranes. Did you know if you make 1,000 of them, you get to make a wish? That's quite a project, Tari said, checking his watch, though perhaps we should save the origami lessons for after school hours. Actually, Hawa interjected, then hesitated. She shouldn't overstep, but I thought it might help with her math. Origami involves a lot of patterns and spatial reasoning. We've been counting by tens as we make them. Tari studied her for a long moment, and Hawa felt the familiar flutter of anxiety. She was just the housekeeper, after all. Who was she to suggest educational strategies? But then he nodded. Aisha's last math test did show improvement. He turned to his daughter. How many cranes have you made so far? 30, Aisha beamed. Miss Hawa says that's 3 sets of 10. We're keeping them in my special box. The corner of Tari's mouth twitched. The one your mother gave you? Aisha nodded solemnly. Miss Hawa says it's good to keep special things from Mommy close, but also make new special things too. Hawa held her breath, wondering if she'd overstepped again. She hadn't meant to intrude on their memories of Zainab, but Aisha had been so hesitant to use the beautiful lacquered box, treating it like a shrine rather than the treasure chest it was meant to be. Tari's expression was unreadable for a moment. Then he looked at Hawa, something soft and vulnerable in his gaze. Thank you, he said quietly. The weight of his gratitude made her chest tight. If only he knew the truth about Kabiru, about why she understood so deeply the need to balance memory with moving forward. Her phone felt heavier in her pocket. The car will be here in 10 minutes, sweetheart, Tari said to Aisha. Better finish those mangoes. As Aisha ate, Tari lingered in the kitchen longer than usual, sipping his coffee and watching them interact. Hawa could feel his eyes on her as she helped Aisha practice more Hausa words, as she packed a small note in her lunchbox as she straightened the little girl's collar with practiced ease. You're good with her, he said finally, his voice low enough that Aisha couldn't hear. She makes it easy, Hawa replied, though her heart clenched at the words. Was she this gentle with Kabiru when he was younger? The memories were starting to blur around the edges, and that terrified her more than anything. Nothing about parenting is easy, Tari said, a note of something like kinship in his voice. I should know. The moments stretched between them, charged with understanding and something else, something neither of them was ready to name. Hawa broke it first, moving to clear Aisha's plate. Your schedule shows a dinner meeting tonight, she said, slipping back into professional mode. Should I plan to keep Aisha occupied until 8? Actually, I was thinking of canceling. Tari set down his coffee cup. The Japanese investors can wait. It's been a while since I had dinner with my daughter. Can Miss Hawa eat with us? Aisha piped up immediately. Hawa started to decline. Dinner meant family time, and she wasn't family no matter how domestic these moments felt. But Tari spoke before she could. You're welcome to join us, he said, his tone casual but his eyes intent on her face. If you don't have other plans, like calling her mother back, like trying to explain to a 2-year-old over the phone why mommy couldn't tuck him in at night, like crying herself to sleep, clutching a tiny blue blanket that still smelled faintly of baby powder. That's very kind, she managed, but I should probably... Please. Aisha's eyes were wide and hopeful. You can teach Daddy Hausa too. Looking at them, the successful businessman and his precious daughter, both watching her with such open invitation, Hawa felt her resolve crumbling. One evening of pretending to be part of their world couldn't hurt, could it? Just a few hours of letting herself believe that this could be her life, that she deserved this kind of happiness. Naam, she said softly, and Aisha clapped in delight. Tari's smile was warm enough to melt the last of her defenses. I look forward to it. As they left for the day, Aisha chattering about showing her paper cranes to her friends, Tari stealing one last glance at Hawa over his shoulder, she allowed herself a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. Then her phone buzzed again, and reality came rushing back. In the empty kitchen, surrounded by evidence of the life she was pretending to be part of, Hawa finally let herself cry. Just a few tears, quickly wiped away as she reached for her phone. She had a job to do, after all, and if that job meant creating happiness for someone else's child while her own grew up without her, well, that was the price she had to pay. What she didn't see was Tari, who had returned for his forgotten briefcase, standing frozen in the doorway. He watched her brush away tears with shaking hands, saw the way she squared her shoulders and lifted her chin, putting her mask back in place. And for the first time, he wondered if perhaps he wasn't the only one in this house carrying a heavy secret. The dinner had gone perfectly. Too perfectly. As Hawa loaded the dishwasher in the Tari mansion's kitchen, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing with fire. The evening replayed in her mind. Aisha's delighted giggles as they all attempted Hausa pronunciation, Tari's surprised appreciation of her homemade moi moi and fish stew, the way his hand had briefly touched hers as she passed him the salt. "You don't have to do that." Tari's voice startled her from her thoughts. He stood in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "You're our guest tonight, remember?" "Force of habit," Hawa replied, closing the dishwasher. The kitchen was dark except for the under-cabinet lighting, casting everything in a warm, intimate glow. "Besides, Aisha's finally asleep. I think all that Hausa wore her out. I haven't seen her that excited about learning since." He trailed off, and Hawa knew he was thinking of Zainab again. "You have a gift with her." The praise, though genuine, felt like a knife in her heart. "I just understand children," she said softly, thinking of Kabiru. Tonight's dinner had been a bittersweet reminder of everything she was missing with her own son. Thunder rumbled outside and rain began pattering against the windows. Tari moved to the kitchen island, opening a bottle of red wine. "Stay for a glass," he offered. "The storm's getting worse, and I'd appreciate the company." Everything in Hawa screamed that this was dangerous. The dim lighting, the wine, the intimate setting. But something in his expression made her nod. Just one glass. He poured 2 generous measures of what she was sure was an obscenely expensive vintage. Their fingers brushed as he handed her a glass, and that same electric current from earlier shot through her. "To new traditions," he said, raising his glass. "New traditions," she echoed, taking a sip. The wine was rich and complex, like everything else in Tari's world. "You know," he said, studying his glass, "I've been meaning to ask you something." Hawa's heart skipped. "Oh, where did you learn to cook like this? Your references mention culinary training, but this is different. This feels like..." He gestured to the kitchen, where traces of their dinner still lingered. "Like home." "My grandmother," she answered truthfully. This, at least, was a safe topic. "She raised me and my siblings after our parents." She stopped, realizing she was straying into personal territory. "After?" Tari prompted gently. "Car accident," she said simply. "I was 8. My grandmother stepped in, kept us all together. She worked 3 jobs, but she always made time to cook for us. Said food was love made visible." Tari's expression softened. "She sounds remarkable." She was. Hawa took another sip of wine, letting the warmth spread through her. "She taught me that family isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about making something beautiful out of what you have." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Tari set his glass down, taking a step closer. "Is that what you're doing here? Making something beautiful?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm just doing my job," she said, but they both knew it was more than that. "Are you?" His voice was low, intimate. "Because what I see is someone bringing life back into this house. Someone teaching my daughter that it's okay to laugh again, to create new memories without betraying the old ones." Hawa's hands trembled slightly. She set her wine glass down before she could drop it. "Mr. Tari." "Tari," he corrected softly. "Tari," she amended. "I think you're giving me too much credit. And I think you're not giving yourself enough." Another crack of thunder, closer now. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged them into darkness. Hawa gasped, instinctively reaching out. Her hand found his chest, solid and warm through his dress shirt. "Stay still," he murmured. "The backup generator should kick in." But in those moments of darkness, something shifted. She was acutely aware of his proximity, of his breath ghosting across her face, of his hand coming up to steady her waist. The air between them crackled with possibility. The emergency lights hummed to life, bathing them in a soft blue glow. Neither of them moved. "Hawa," he breathed, and the way he said her name made her knees weak. His hand on her waist tightened slightly. "We can't," she whispered, even as she tilted her face up to his. "Why not?" 1,000 reasons tumbled through her mind. Because he was her employer. Because their worlds were too different. Because she was lying to him about something fundamental. Because Kabiru... Her phone buzzed in her pocket, shattering the moment. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. Reality crashed back like a bucket of ice water. Hawa stepped back, breaking contact. "I should check on Aisha," she said quickly. Make sure the storm didn't wake her. Tari didn't try to stop her, but she felt his eyes on her as she fled the kitchen. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, heart pounding. Her phone buzzed again, insistently. With trembling fingers, she answered. "Mama, Hawa, baby." Her mother's voice was tight with concern. "Kabiru is running a fever. The doctor says it's just an ear infection, but he's been crying for you all night." The world tilted on its axis. In the kitchen, she could hear Tari moving around, probably cleaning up their wine glasses. In her pocket was her last paycheck, enough to cover Kabiru's medicine, but not much else. And between these two realities, she stood frozen. "I'll send money for the prescription," she managed. Tell him Mommy loves him. Baby, he needs more than money. He needs... "I have to go," Hawa cut her off, tears threatening. "I'll call tomorrow." She ended the call just as Tari appeared in the hallway. "Aisha's still asleep?" he said, then noticed her expression. "Hawa, what's wrong?" "Nothing," she said quickly, pasting on a smile. "Just checking messages. I should probably head to my quarters before the storm gets worse." He looked like he wanted to say more, to return to that charged moment in the kitchen, but something in her posture must have warned him off. "Of course. Thank you for dinner, and for everything else." Hawa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She turned and walked away. Each step an exercise in self-control. Behind her, she heard him sigh, a sound so full of longing it made her heart ache. In her small apartment above the garage, Hawa curled up on her bed, listening to the storm rage outside. She pulled out her phone, opening the photo gallery. Kabiru's face smiled up at her, chubby cheeks and bright eyes so full of trust. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered to the photo. "Everything is for you." But as thunder rolled overhead and rain lashed against her windows, she wondered how much longer she could keep her two worlds from colliding. In the main house, she could see light still on in Tari's study. The distance between them felt both infinite and paper-thin. Something had to give. She just prayed she would be strong enough when it did. 3 days after the storm, life in the Tari mansion had settled back into its routine, but something fundamental had shifted. Tari found himself lingering over breakfast, making excuses to work from home, his eyes constantly drawn to Hawa as she moved through the house. She, in turn, seemed to be avoiding being alone with him, always keeping Aisha between them like a shield. That morning, however, everything changed. "Daddy, can Miss Hawa come to my career day?" Aisha asked over breakfast, her voice hopeful. Everyone's supposed to bring someone they want to be like when they grow up. Tari lowered his coffee cup slowly, watching Hawa freeze in the act of wiping down the counter. "What about Daddy?" he asked carefully. "I thought you wanted to be a businesswoman like me." Aisha shook her head, dark curls bouncing. "I want to be like Miss Hawa. She makes people happy, and she knows how to fix everything, and she makes the best cookies." "And Aisha," Hawa interrupted gently, her voice strained, "I'm sure your father would be much better for career day. He's very successful but I want you." Aisha's lower lip trembled. "You promised to always be here, and career day is important." The silence that followed was deafening. Tari watched as all color drained from Hawa's face. "Sweetheart," she said finally, "I never meant to. I shouldn't have." "You did promise," Aisha insisted. "When I was scared during the thunderstorm, you said you'd always be here to protect me. You pinky swore." Tari saw something break in Hawa's expression. Without warning, she turned and fled the kitchen, leaving them both staring after her. "Did I do something wrong?" Isha's voice was small. "No, princess." Tari stood, straightening his tie. "Stay here and finish your breakfast. I'll talk to Miss Hawa." He found her in the garden, gripping the edge of the stone fountain, her shoulders shaking. The morning sun caught the tears on her cheeks, making them glitter like diamonds. "Hawa, I'm so sorry, Mr. Tari," she said without turning. "I know I overstepped, making promises to Aisha. It was unprofessional. I'll pack my things." "Stop." His voice was firm but gentle. "Look at me." She turned slowly, and the pain in her eyes took his breath away. She looked haunted. "You've brought more life and joy into this house in a few months than we've had in years," he said quietly. "Aisha adores you, and I..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've come to depend on you too." "You don't understand," she whispered. "I can't. I shouldn't." "Then help me understand." He took a step closer. Something's hurting you, Hawa. I see it every time you get a phone call, every time Aisha hugs you. What are you running from? For a moment, he thought she might tell him. Her lips parted, her eyes searched his face, and he could almost feel the weight of her secret trying to break free. Then her phone rang. The sound seemed to snap her out of whatever spell had fallen over them. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. I should check on Aisha. Hawa, wait! But she was already gone, leaving him alone with the splashing fountain and the scent of her vanilla perfume lingering in the air. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of tension. Tari canceled his meetings, unable to focus on anything but the way Hawa's hands trembled as she helped Aisha pack her school bag, the forced brightness in her voice as she promised to think about career day. Around noon, his intercom buzzed. His assistant's voice came through, crisp and professional. Mr. Tari, there's a Miss Aminu here to see you. She says it's about Hawa. Tari's heart stopped. Send her up. The woman who entered his office was in her 60s, with Hawa's same warm brown eyes and an air of quiet dignity despite her obvious distress. She carried a sleeping toddler on her hip, a beautiful boy with curls like Hawa's. Mr. Tari, she said without preamble, I'm sorry to come unannounced, but I didn't know what else to do. Kabiru's fever won't break, and Hawa needs to know. Kabiru? Tari interrupted, his world tilting on its axis as he stared at the child. My grandson, Miss Aminu said softly. She didn't tell you about him, did she? Tari sank into his chair, pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. The phone calls, the tears, the way Hawa sometimes stared into space with such longing it hurt to watch. Why? He managed. Miss Aminu adjusted the sleeping boy on her hip. She needed this job, Mr. Tari, needed the live-in position to save money, but she knew most lawyers wouldn't hire a single mother, especially not after. She trailed off, looking uncertain. After what? After his father abandoned them, left them with nothing but debt and broken promises. Hawa's been working so hard to give Kabiru a better life, but it's killing her to be away from him. And now that he's sick... Tari stood abruptly. Where is she now? In the kitchen, I think. I saw her car in the driveway. Stay here, he said, already moving toward the door. Please. He found Hawa in the kitchen, preparing lunch with mechanical movements. She looked up when he entered, and he saw the exact moment she registered his expression. You know, she breathed. Your mother's in my office, he said quietly. With Kabiru. The knife she was holding clattered to the counter. No, she whispered. No. He's sick, Hawa. He needs you. She crumpled then, a sob tearing from her throat. I'm so sorry. I never meant to lie to you. I needed this job, needed to give him a better life, but I couldn't bear to be away from him, and then Aisha needed me too, and you. She broke off, pressing her hands to her face. I'll leave. Just please stop. Tari crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, pulling her hands away from her face. Look at me. She raised her tear-stained face to his, and all his carefully constructed walls crumbled. I don't care that you have a son, he said fiercely. I care that you've been carrying this pain alone, that you felt you couldn't trust me with the truth. How can you say that? She whispered. I lied to you. I'm just the help, and I dared to. She gestured helplessly at the kitchen, at all the moments they'd shared here. You're not just anything, Tari said. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. You're the woman who brought my daughter back to life, who makes this house feel like a home again, who makes me want things I thought I'd never want again. Hawa's breath hitched. Hawa, let me help, he murmured. Let me be there for you, the way you've been there for us. For a long moment, she just stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. Then slowly, she nodded. I need to see my son, she whispered. Then let's go see him together. He took her hand, and together they walked toward his office, toward the truth, toward whatever came next. Neither of them knew what the future held, but for the first time, they wouldn't face it alone. Behind them, the kitchen stood silent, witness to another wall coming down, another step toward healing. And somewhere above, Aisha's paper cranes watched over it all, counting down to the moment when wishes might finally come true. The guest room transformed overnight. Tari had his staff bring in a toddler bed, complete with rocket ship bedding and a mobile of stars and planets. A small sound machine played gentle ocean waves, and a nightlight cast soft patterns on the wall. In the corner, a rocking chair waited, ready for midnight comfort sessions. Hawa stood in the doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other holding Kabiru as he slept against her shoulder. The fever had finally broken, but she couldn't bring herself to put him down. 2 months apart felt like an eternity. Is it too much? Tari asked softly, coming up behind her. I can have them change anything that's not right. She shook her head, unable to speak. How could she explain what this meant? This room wasn't just furniture and decorations. It was acceptance, understanding, a bridge between her two worlds. You didn't have to do all this, she finally managed. Yes, I did. His voice was firm but gentle. This is your home now, both of you. Home. The word echoed in her chest, filling empty spaces she hadn't known existed. But doubt crept in, persistent as a shadow. What about your board members, the social circles you move in, having your housekeeper's child living here? Stop. Tari moved to stand in front of her, his expression intense. First, you're more than just a housekeeper. You're family. And second, he reached out gently, touching Kabiru's curls. This little boy is not illegitimate. He's a child who deserves love and stability, just like Aisha. At the sound of her name, Aisha appeared in the hallway, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. She had been unusually quiet since meeting Kabiru, and Hawa had been worried about her reaction. Can I come in? She asked hesitantly. Of course, sweetheart. Hawa knelt down, still holding Kabiru. Would you like to see his room? Aisha stepped inside, her eyes wide as she took in the space. It looks like outer space, she said softly, like my astronomy books. Your daddy picked everything out, Hawa told her. He thought Kabiru might like stars as much as you do. Aisha moved closer, studying the sleeping toddler. Is he going to be my brother now? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Hawa looked up at Tari, panic fluttering in her chest. How were they supposed to explain this complicated situation to a 6-year-old? But Tari, as always, knew exactly what to say. He knelt down beside them, creating a small circle of intimacy. What do you think about that idea? He asked Aisha gently. Aisha chewed her lip, considering. Would he want to look at my telescope with me? And would he like my paper cranes? And she hesitated, and would Miss Hawa still have time to make cookies with me? Oh, honey. Hawa reached out with her free arm, pulling Aisha close. I will always have time for you. Always. Promise. Promise? Aisha's voice was small. I promise. This time, Hawa made the vow without fear. And you know what? Kabiru loves cookies too. Maybe we could all make them together? Aisha brightened. Can we make some now for when he wakes up? Tari chuckled. It's almost bedtime, princess, but maybe tomorrow? Actually, Hawa said, an idea forming. What if we all had breakfast together in the morning? I could make those special pancakes you like. The ones with faces, with blueberry eyes? Aisha bounced excitedly, then caught herself glancing at the sleeping Kabiru. Sorry, she whispered. It's okay. Hawa smiled. He sleeps like a rock, just like his mama. Like you did during the thunderstorm? Tari asked, his eyes twinkling. Because I distinctly remember someone jumping at every lightning flash. I was not jumping, Hawa protested, but she was smiling too. I was being vigilant, very vigilant. He agreed solemnly, but his hand found hers and squeezed gently. The moment was interrupted by Kabiru stirring, his little face scrunching up as he woke. He blinked owlishly at the unfamiliar room, then saw Aisha. Hi, he said shyly, tucking his face into Hawa's neck. Hi, Aisha replied, equally shy. Then, gathering her courage, she held out her elephant. This is Mr. Tusk's. He's really good at making people feel better when they're sick. Kabiru peeked out, interested. Really? Uh-huh. He has magic in his trunk. Want to see? Hawa felt tears pricking her eyes as she watched Aisha demonstrate Mr. Tusk's magic, a simple squeeze of the trunk that made his ears wiggle. Kabiru's delighted giggle filled the room, and just like that, a connection was formed. Mama? Kabiru asked, pointing at the rocket ship bed. Stars. That's your new bed, baby, Hawa told him. Do you like it? He nodded enthusiastically. Like Aisha's book. You saw my astronomy book? Aisha asked, surprised. He loves the pictures, Hawa explained. When I would video chat with him, he always wanted me to show him the pages about Saturn. That's my favorite planet too, Aisha exclaimed. Daddy, can I get my book to show Kabiru? Tari glanced at his watch. 1 chapter, then bedtime for everyone. Deal? Deal. Aisha ran off to fetch her book. You're amazing with them, Hawa said softly when she was gone. Most men would be overwhelmed by all this. Most men haven't had you showing them what real strength looks like, he replied, his voice equally soft. Besides, look at them. How could anyone not want this? As if on cue, Aisha returned with her book. Soon they were all settled in the rocking chair, somehow managing to fit despite it being made for one, with Aisha perched on Tari's knee and Kabiru in Hawa's lap. The books spread across all of them. Saturn's rings are made of ice and rock, Aisha read carefully, pointing to each word. They stretch as wide as... Hawa let the words wash over her, taking in the scene. Her son, healthy and happy in her arms, Aisha proudly sharing her knowledge. Tari, solid and warm beside her, his arms stretched along the back of the chair, fingers occasionally brushing her shoulder. It wasn't perfect. There would be questions to answer, adjustments to make, challenges to face. The world outside this room might not understand or approve of their unconventional family. But as Kabiru's weight grew heavier in her arms and Aisha's voice grew sleepier, Hawa realized something important. Perfect wasn't what they needed. They just needed each other. I think it's bedtime, Tari whispered as both children's eyes began to droop. Together, they tucked Aisha into her bed down the hall, then returned to settle Kabiru in his new room. The little boy went easily, worn out from his illness and the excitement of the day. Standing in the doorway, watching the star patterns dance across the ceiling, Hawa felt Tari's presence behind her. Stay, he said quietly. Not as the housekeeper, not as an employee. Stay because we want you here. Both of you. She turned to face him, finding nothing but sincerity in his eyes. Are you sure? This changes everything. Everything already changed the moment you walked into our lives, he said, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. We just didn't know it yet. In the soft glow of the nightlight, surrounded by the gentle sound of waves and the quiet breathing of her son, Hawa made her choice. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against Tari's chest, and felt his arms come around her. Okay, she whispered. We'll stay. Above them, Aisha's paper cranes watched over their growing family, counting down to wishes that were already coming true. The annual Abuja Business Leadership Gala was in full swing at the Transcorp Hilton. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the crowd of Abuja's elite, their jewelry sparkling like stars against the night sky. Tari adjusted his agbada, scanning the room with practiced ease. This was his world, a world of power, handshakes, and million-dollar deals sealed over champagne. But tonight felt different. Mr. Tari, Alhaji Shehu, chairman of the board, approached with his wife in tow. We missed you at the last 2 dinner parties. Been busy with domestic matters, I hear? The pause was slight but deliberate. Tari felt his jaw tighten. News traveled fast in their circles, and the sight of Hawa and Kabiru at the private school drop-off had sparked plenty of gossip. Very busy, he replied smoothly, and very happy. Hajia Mariam's perfectly lined lips curved into a practiced smile. It's so charitable of you, taking in your housekeeper's child, though some might question the appropriateness. Some might question a lot of things, Hajia Mariam, Tari cut in, his voice pleasant but firm. Like why the Shehu Foundation's overseas investments don't match their reported charitable giving. The couple's smiles froze. With a murmured excuse, they moved away, leaving Tari alone with his untouched champagne. His phone buzzed, a text from Hawa with a photo attached. Aisha and Kabiru were curled up on the library sofa surrounded by books, both fast asleep. The caption read, Our little astronomers crashed after their 3rd reading of the solar system. Something in his chest loosened at the sight. He was typing a response when another voice interrupted. They're calling her your live-in mistress, you know. Tari looked up to find Zainab's sister, Jamila, watching him with concern. Of all his late wife's family, she was the only one who still maintained regular contact. Hello, Jamila. Tari. She touched his arm gently. I'm not judging. God knows Zainab would have wanted you and Aisha to be happy. But people are talking. Let them talk. It's not that simple. Jamila glanced around before lowering her voice. The board members, the investors, their traditional old money. They see you moving your housekeeper and her child into your home, and they wonder about your judgment. My judgment? Tari felt anger rising. My judgment is that 2 children deserve love and stability. My judgment is that Hawa Garba has brought more joy into our lives in a few months than we've had in years. And your feelings for her have nothing to do with it. Tari met his sister-in-law's gaze steadily. My feelings for her have everything to do with it. Jamila studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You always were stubborn. She squeezed his arm. Just be careful. Not everyone will understand. As if to prove her point, whispers followed Tari throughout the evening. He caught fragments of conversations, saw the sidelong glances, and raised eyebrows. By the time he made his excuses and left, his shoulders were tight with tension. The drive home took him through Abuja's quieter neighborhoods, past houses where normal families lived normal lives without scrutiny. But as he pulled up to his own gates, he couldn't bring himself to regret any of his choices. The mansion was mostly dark, but warm light spilled from the kitchen windows. He found Hawa there, wearing leggings and one of his old university t-shirts, making hot chocolate. "The kids finally went down?" he asked, loosening his agbada. She turned, and the sight of her, comfortable, at home, beautiful without trying, made his heart skip. "After 3 bedtime stories and 2 glasses of water each." She smiled, then noticed his expression. "That bad, huh?" "Nothing I can't handle." He moved closer, accepting the mug she offered. "Though apparently you're my live-in mistress now." Hawa's hand trembled slightly as she set down her own mug. "Tari, if this is too much, don't." He set his mug down and pulled her close. "Don't let them make you doubt this. Your reputation, your business, can survive a few whispers. What they can't survive is losing you. Either of you." He touched her cheek gently. She leaned into his touch, but he could still see worry in her eyes. "I heard Aisha's teacher asking her questions today about our living arrangement. She looked at me like I was taking advantage, using my son to trap you or something equally horrible." Hawa pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "Maybe we should move back to the garage apartment, keep some distance, at least in public." "No." Tari's voice was firm. "We're not hiding, we're not ashamed, but do you know what Aisha told her teacher?" He stepped closer again, unwilling to let her retreat. "She said her family was special because it had double the love. That's how our daughter sees us, Hawa. That's what matters." Tears welled in her eyes. "Our daughter?" "Yes," he wiped away a tear that escaped. "Our daughter, our son, our family. The rest of the world can adjust or not. I don't care." A sound from the doorway made them both turn. Isha stood there in her unicorn pajamas, holding Kabiru's hand. The little boy was clutching Mr. Tusk's, his eyes sleepy. "Bad dream," Aisha explained. "Kabiru wanted his mama, and I said I'd help him find you." Hawa immediately moved to scoop up her son, but Tari caught her arm gently. "Hey kids," he said softly. "How about some hot chocolate and a story in the family room? Just this once." Aisha's face lit up. "Can we make a fort?" "I don't see why not." Tari was already removing his suit jacket. Hawa looked at him, still in his formal wear, ready to build blanket forts and drink hot chocolate at midnight, and felt love surge through her chest. "Fort time it is," she agreed, lifting Kabiru. "But first, group hug." They came together naturally, 4 pieces of a puzzle finding their fit. Kabiru's sleepy weight, Aisha's excited bouncing, Tari's solid presence. It felt right in a way that defied explanation. Later, as they all curled up in their makeshift fort, the children drifting off between them, Tari caught Hawa's hand in the dim light. "This is worth fighting for," he whispered. She squeezed his hand, thinking of all the obstacles ahead, the judgments, the whispers, the disapproving glances. But looking at their sleeping children, at the man who had opened his heart to her son, she knew her answer. "Yes," she whispered back. "It is." Above them, through a gap in the blankets, they could see Aisha's paper cranes hanging from the ceiling. 312 now, each one a step closer to their 1,000-crane wish. But watching her family sleep peacefully in their cocoon of blankets and love, Hawa wondered if some wishes didn't need 1,000 cranes to come true. They just needed courage, love, and the strength to face the world together. The letter arrived on expensive cream-colored stationery, hand-delivered to Tari's office. The return address belonged to one of Abuja's most prestigious law firms, but it was the name at the bottom that made his blood run cold. Malam Abubakar, Zainab's father. "Sir," his assistant hovered in the doorway, "Miss Hawa is on line 1, something about Aisha's career day presentation." Tari glanced at his watch. Right. Today was the day Hawa would speak to Aisha's class. They'd spent weeks preparing, turning their story into something a room full of first graders could understand. Family, love, acceptance. "Tell her I'll call back in 5 minutes." Alone in his office, Tari unfolded the letter. As he read, his grip on the paper tightened until his knuckles turned white. Across town, Hawa stood before 20 wide-eyed first graders, including an especially proud Aisha. She'd chosen to wear her favorite yellow Ankara dress, the one that made her feel confident despite the whispers from some of the other parents at the back of the room. Being a homemaker isn't just about keeping a house clean, she explained, showing pictures of the garden they'd planted together, the science experiments they did in the kitchen, the astronomical charts decorating their walls. It's about creating a space where everyone feels safe to grow and learn. Like our paper cranes. We're making 1,000 of them, Aisha chimed in. That's right, sweetie, Hawa smiled. And what happens when we finish? We get to make a wish, and I'm gonna wish for... The classroom door opened abruptly. Tari stood there, his face tight with tension. Hawa, we need to go now. But Daddy, she's not finished. It's an emergency. Something in his voice made Hawa's heart stop. She quickly thanked the teacher and gathered their things, following Tari out while whispers erupted behind them. In the car, he handed her the letter wordlessly. As she read, her hands began to shake. He's suing for custody of Aisha? Her voice cracked. On what grounds? Moral turpitude, unsuitable living environment, exposure to inappropriate relationships. Tari's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He claims I'm unfit because I've allowed my domestic employee to usurp his daughter's maternal role. Tears burned in Hawa's eyes. This is my fault. If I hadn't moved in, if I hadn't gotten so close to Aisha... Stop. Tari pulled into their driveway, turning to face her. This isn't your fault. Malam Abubakar never approved of me, even when Zainab was alive. He thought his daughter married beneath her by choosing someone who earned his money instead of inheriting it. This is just his latest attempt to control what's left of Zainab's legacy. But he might win. He has money influence. So do I. Tari took her hand. And I have something he doesn't. A real family worth fighting for. Inside, they found Aisha and Kabiru in the kitchen with Miss Aminu, who'd been watching Kabiru during career day. The children were decorating cookies, their faces dusted with flour and happiness. Look what we made. Kabiru held up a lopsided cookie. It's Saturn. More like Jupiter, Aisha corrected gently. Saturn has rings, remember? Watching them, so innocent, so perfectly comfortable with each other, Hawa felt fear squeeze her heart. How could anyone want to tear this apart? We need to talk, Tari said quietly to Miss Aminu. Could you take the kids upstairs? Once they were alone, Tari pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyers. We'll fight this, Hawa. Hawa touched his arm. Maybe we should give him what he wants. If I move out? No. His voice was steel. Running won't solve anything. It'll just prove him right, make it look like we have something to hide. But he might dig up about Kabiru's father, about my past. I don't care about your past. Tari pulled her close. I care about our future, all of us, together. The sound of footsteps made them turn. Aisha stood in the doorway, clutching her latest paper crane. Are we in trouble? She asked in a small voice. Is it because of career day? No, baby. Hawa knelt down. Why would you think that? Because Tommy's mom said you shouldn't be there. She said you're not my real mom, and it's wrong to pretend. Hawa felt like she'd been slapped. Before she could respond, Tari knelt beside them. Aisha, do you remember what Mommy used to say about family? Aisha nodded. That it's made of love, not just blood. Exactly, and our family has so much love, doesn't it? With you and me and Hawa and Kabiru. And Mr. Tusks, Aisha added seriously. And Mr. Tusks, Tari agreed, managing a smile. Some people might not understand our family, but that doesn't make it any less real. Like my paper cranes. Aisha held up her latest creation. Tommy said they're just paper, but I know they're magic because they're made with love. Hawa pulled the little girl close, tears spilling over. That's right, sweetheart. Love is the strongest magic there is. Upstairs, they could hear Kabiru singing his ABCs with Miss Aminu. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, catching the hundreds of paper cranes that now decorated their home, each one representing a moment of hope, of patience, of family. Tari's phone buzzed, his lawyers ready to fight. But for a moment, he just held his family, memorizing the feeling of their strength together. Whatever happens, he whispered, we face it as a family. Hawa nodded against his shoulder, one arm around Aisha, her other hand reaching for his. They had built something precious here, something worth protecting. And if Zainab's father wanted a fight, he would learn what real family loyalty meant. Because paper cranes weren't the only kind of magic in their home. There was magic in the way Kabiru and Aisha shared secrets and stories, magic in the quiet moments when they all piled onto the couch for movie nights, magic in the simple truth that love doesn't follow rules or respect social boundaries. It just is, pure and powerful and worth any battle. 547, Aisha mumbled against Hawa's dress. What's that, sweetheart? That's how many cranes we have now. We're more than halfway to our wish. Tari and Hawa exchanged glances over her head. Maybe they didn't need to wait for 1,000 cranes. Maybe their real wish was already here, not in the granting, but in the making, in the daily choice to love, to stay, to fight for what mattered. The sound of the doorbell made them all jump. Through the front window, they could see an expensive car in the driveway, Malam Abubakar's Bentley. I'll handle this, Tari said, straightening his agbada. No, Hawa stood, squaring her shoulders. We'll handle it together, as a family. Aisha slipped her small hand into Hawa's. Can I show Grandpa my cranes? Maybe if he sees how pretty they are, he'll understand about magic. Oh, sweetheart. Hawa knelt down again, smoothing Aisha's curls. Sometimes grown-ups have a hard time believing in magic, but that doesn't mean we stop believing, right? Right. Aisha's chin lifted determinedly. Because we're special. We have double the love. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. But standing there in their kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their life together, cookies cooling on racks, artwork on the fridge, paper cranes catching the light, they felt stronger than any storm that might be brewing. Because love, real love, doesn't bow to legal threats or social pressure. It stands its ground, transforms lives, and creates families from the most unexpected ingredients. And sometimes, just sometimes, it makes wishes come true long before the 1,000th crane takes flight. Malam Abubakar stood in the Tari mansion's living room like an emperor surveying conquered territory. His tailored agbada and patrician bearing spoke of old money, of exclusive clubs and boardrooms where deals were made with handshakes and threats were delivered with smiles. This can all be very simple, Tari, he said, swirling the non-alcoholic drink he'd poured himself uninvited. Send the help and her child back where they belong. Return to an appropriate lifestyle. I'll withdraw the custody suit, and Aisha can continue having a relationship with both of us. Tari felt Hawa tense beside him, but kept his voice steady. The help has a name, Malam Abubakar, and her son is part of this family now. Family? Malam Abubakar's laugh was cold. You're living in sin with the maid, exposing my granddaughter to God knows what kind of influence. What would Zainab say? Zainab, Tari said quietly, would be grateful that her daughter is loved and happy. Happy? Malam Abubakar set down his glass hard enough to slosh liquid over the side. She's confused. Living in this circus. A proper young lady needs structure, tradition, not some cobbled-together arrangement with strangers. We're not strangers, Hawa spoke up, her voice firm despite her trembling hands. We're the people who make her breakfast every morning, who help with her homework, who know that she still sleeps with her mom's old scarf when she's scared, and that she wants to be an astronaut and a baker at the same time. Malam Abubakar turned to her, his expression glacial. You presume too much, Miss Garba, getting ideas above your station. Did you think you could just slide into my daughter's place, use your child to cement your position here? That's enough. Tari stepped forward, but Hawa caught his arm. No, let him speak, she said. I want to hear exactly what he thinks of me, of us. What I think. Malam Abubakar's eyes narrowed. I think you're an opportunist who got lucky, found a wealthy widower, used his guilt and loneliness to worm your way in. But you forgot something crucial. Aisha has a real family, a grandmother who misses her terribly, cousins her own age, a legacy to uphold. A legacy of what? Hawa challenged. Of judgment? Of looking down on anyone who doesn't fit your narrow view of family? How dare you? No, how dare you? Hawa's voice rose slightly. You come into our home, threaten to tear apart a little girl's world, all because you can't accept that love doesn't follow your rules. The sound of small feet on the stairs made them all turn. Aisha stood there in her astronomy pajamas, Kabiru hiding behind her legs. Why are you yelling at Miss Hawa? She demanded, staring at her grandfather. She's my family too. Malam Abubakar's expression softened slightly. Aisha, darling, come here. We need to talk about some changes. No. Aisha's chin jutted out stubbornly. You're being mean. Mommy said mean people don't get cookies or hugs. Aisha, Tari started, but she wasn't finished. And Mommy also said that love is like the stars. There's always room for more. That's why she bought me my telescope, remember? To see how big the universe is. She turned to Malam Abubakar. You don't want me to have more love, Grandpa? Like the stars? The room fell silent. Malam Abubakar stared at his granddaughter, something shifting in his expression. Zainab said that? He asked softly. About the stars? Aha! And Miss Hawa helps me use the telescope now. She knows all the constellations just like Mommy did, and she makes hot chocolate with marshmallow moons, and she never gets mad when I ask too many questions. Kabiru peered around Aisha's legs. Stars are pretty, he offered shyly. Aisha reached back to pat his head. This is my brother now. He's little, but he's learning about Saturn's rings. Want to see our models? Malam Abubakar's hands clenched at his sides. Aisha, this isn't about... Yes, it is. She grabbed Kabiru's hand and marched forward. Come see our cranes, too. We're making 1,000 for magic. Before anyone could stop her, she was pulling both Kabiru and her grandfather toward the study, where hundreds of paper cranes hung from the ceiling in a rainbow array. See? She pointed up. Each one is a wish for love and happiness and family. That's what Mommy would want, right? More wishes, more love. Malam Abubakar stood still, surrounded by paper birds and childhood dreams. For a moment, the mask of aristocratic disdain slipped, revealing something raw underneath. Zainab loved origami, he said quietly. She used to fold little boats for you when you were a baby. I know. Aisha tugged his sleeve. Miss Hawa found pictures in Mommy's old albums. She helped me make boats too. See? She pointed to a shelf where tiny paper boats sat beside framed photos. Zainab holding baby Aisha, Tari reading to her. And now new ones, Hawa teaching her to bake, Kabiru sharing his toys, all of them together at the park. Malam Abubakar picked up one of the photos, his hands not quite steady. You look happy. I am happy, Grandpa. We all are. Even when we're sad about Mommy, we can still be happy too. Miss Hawa says that's what love does, makes room for everything. Tari and Hawa stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold, his arms slipped around her waist, pulling her close. Out of the mouths of babes, he whispered. Malam Abubakar sat down the photo carefully. These cranes, they're very well made. Miss Hawa teaches us patience, Aisha explained, and precision. That's a big word, right? Very big. Malam Abubakar's voice was rough. Your mother, she would have appreciated that, the patience part. She always said I rush things too much. Then don't rush now, Aisha said with 6-year-old logic. Stay for cookies. Watch the stars with us. See how nice our family is. Malam Abubakar looked at his granddaughter, really looked at her. Perhaps for the first time, seeing not just Zainab's child, but a person in her own right, a person who was thriving. I should go, he said finally, and my lawyers will be expecting. Call them, Tari suggested quietly. Tell them to stand down, stay for dinner. Meet your grandson. Grandson? Malam Abubakar's head snapped up. That's what families do, right? Hawa spoke softly. They grow, they change, they make room for more love. For a long moment, Malam Abubakar stood frozen. Then Kabiru toddled over to him, holding up a slightly crushed paper crane. For you, he said solemnly. Magic. Malam Abubakar took the crane with hands that trembled slightly. Thank you, young man. His name's Kabiru, Aisha supplied helpfully. He's very good at puzzles. Something in Malam Abubakar's face cracked then, not breaking, but softening like ice in spring, revealing the water beneath. Perhaps I could stay just for a little while. Aisha beamed. I'll get Mr. Flahab tusks. He loves meeting new family. As she ran off, pulling Kabiru with her, Malam Abubakar turned to Tari and Hawa. This doesn't mean I approve, he said stiffly. But Zainab always said I was too quick to judge, too set in my ways. That's all we're asking for, Tari replied. Time. A chance to show you what we already know, that family, Hawa added softly, is more than blood and tradition. It's choice, it's love, it's making room for magic, even when it comes in unexpected packages. Above them, paper cranes danced in the evening breeze from the open window. Each one a wish, a prayer, a step toward understanding. And if Malam Abubakar's eyes were a bit damp as he watched his grandchildren return with cookies and stuffed elephants and stars in their eyes, well, maybe that was a kind of magic too, the kind that transforms hearts, one paper crane at a time. 2 weeks after Malam Abubakar's unexpected visit, change swept through the Tari mansion like a gentle spring breeze. The custody lawsuit was withdrawn with a formal apology. Whispers at the country club turned from scandal to curiosity, and on a warm Sunday morning the family gathered in the garden for a very special occasion. 998, Aisha counted carefully, adding another crane to their collection. It's only 2 more to go. The garden had been transformed. Paper cranes of every color hung from the trees, catching sunlight like prisms. Tables dotted the lawn, each one set with elegant simplicity, white linens, fresh flowers, and at the center of each, a carefully crafted paper crane. "Are you sure about this?" Hawa asked Tari for the 100th time, adjusting the simple white sundress she wore. "Having the engagement party here with everyone?" Tari caught her hand, kissing her palm. "I'm sure about us. The rest is just details." From across the garden, Malam Abubakar watched them with an expression that had softened considerably since that night among the paper cranes. He sat with Kabiru on his lap, teaching the toddler how to fold a simple boat. "Like this, Grandpa?" Kabiru asked, his little face scrunched in concentration. "Perfect, young man," Malam Abubakar praised, and the title no longer held any irony. "You have your mother's artistic touch." Miss Aminu wiped tears from her eyes as she arranged pastries on a nearby table. "Never thought I'd see the day," she murmured to Jamila, who was helping her. "My baby girl getting engaged to a man like Tari." "Love has its own logic," Jamila replied, watching Aisha direct the caterers with all the authority of a tiny event planner. "Zainab would have approved, you know. She always said Tari deserved a second chance at happiness." The guest list was smaller than Abuja society might have expected, just family and close friends who had supported their unconventional journey. No board members wringing their hands about propriety, no social climbers seeking gossip, just people who understood that love writes its own rules. "Daddy," Aisha called out, "can we do the last 2 cranes now before everyone comes?" Tari checked his watch. "We have time. Hawa?" They gathered around the library table they'd moved to the garden. Tari, Hawa, Aisha, and Kabiru. Malam Abubakar and the grandmothers watched from nearby, a united front of reformed skeptics. "The last one should be special," Aisha declared. "One from me and Kabiru, and one from Daddy and Miss Hawa, almost Mommy." "Mommy," Kabiru corrected, using the term they'd settled on as their family grew closer. The simple phrase brought fresh tears to Hawa's eyes. Together, they folded the final cranes, one pure white, one deep blue like the night sky. As they added them to the collection, 1,000 paper birds caught the morning light, turning the garden into a kaleidoscope of color and hope. "Time to make our wish," Aisha bounced excitedly. "But we already have everything we wished for," Hawa said softly, looking at her family. "Don't we?" Tari squeezed her hand. "Almost everything." He stepped forward, and the garden fell silent. Even the birds seemed to pause their morning songs. "When Zainab died," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed garden, "I thought I'd never find this kind of happiness again. I built walls around my heart, around Aisha's life, thinking I was protecting us. But love doesn't work that way. It finds the cracks, seeps through, makes flowers grow in the hardest places." He turned to Hawa, taking both her hands in his. "You and Kabiru didn't just enter our lives. You transformed them. You showed us that family isn't about replacing what was lost, but about growing something new, something just as beautiful." Hawa's vision blurred with tears as Tari knelt before her. The ring he held caught the sunlight like a fallen star. "Aisha's paper cranes taught us about patience, about believing in magic," he continued. 1,000 careful folds, 1,000 moments of hope, but the real magic wasn't in completing them. It was in the journey, in late-night cookie baking and early morning astronomy lessons, in healing hearts and building bridges, in finding home. "Home," Hawa whispered. "Exactly." Tari's smile was radiant. "So, Hawa Garba, surrounded by our family, our 1,000 paper wishes, and all the love that brought us here, will you marry me?" "Say yes," Aisha stage whispered, making everyone laugh through their tears. "Yes," Hawa breathed. 1,000 times yes." As Tari slipped the ring onto her finger, applause broke out across the garden. Aisha and Kabru rushed forward for a group hug, nearly knocking them over. Malam Abubakar cleared his throat gruffly, suspiciously bright-eyed behind his usual stern expression. "Well done, Tari," he said, clapping his former son-in-law's shoulder. "Zainab would be proud of all of us, I think." Miss Aminu pulled Hawa into a fierce embrace. "Your grandmother would have loved this, baby girl. All these paper birds, all this joy." The morning progressed into afternoon, filled with laughter and tears and endless toasts. The garden filled with guests who came expecting a simple engagement party and found themselves witnesses to something rarer, the blending of families, the healing of old wounds, the triumph of love over prejudice. Aisha and Kabiru ran between the tables, proud hosts of their expanded family, telling anyone who would listen about their paper cranes, about wishes and magic and hearts as big as the universe. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the paper birds, Tari found Hawa by the fountain. She was watching their children, her engagement ring catching the last rays of daylight. Having second thoughts, he teased gently. And what do you wish for now? Hawa looked around at Malam Abu Bakar teaching Kabiru another origami shape, at Miss Aminu and Jamila sharing family recipes, at Aisha explaining constellations to her young cousins, at the 1,000 paper cranes watching over them all. Nothing, she said softly. Everything I could wish for is right here. Tari kissed her then, soft and sweet. As their paper birds danced in the evening breeze above them, the first stars began to appear, countless points of light in an infinite sky. Proof that there's always room for more love, more family, more magic, just like Aisha had said all along. The wedding took place at twilight, just in the same garden where paper cranes had first brought their wishes to life. Now those 1,000 colorful birds hung among twinkling lights, creating a ceiling of dreams above the intimate gathering. The Abuja sky painted itself in shades of purple and gold, and the first stars began to peek through, as if heaven itself wanted to witness this moment. Aisha and Kabiru led the processional, the children's faces glowing with importance. Aisha scattered rose petals with scientific precision, explaining to anyone who would listen that she'd calculated the exact number needed for optimal coverage. Kabiru followed with the rings, proudly wearing a miniature version of Tari's traditional Baban Riga. When Hawa appeared at the garden path, Tari felt his heart stop. She wore a simple gown that seemed to catch every bit of remaining sunlight, her natural curls crowned with tiny paper cranes that Aisha had insisted on adding to her veil. But it was her smile, radiant, sure, full of love, that took his breath away. Ready? Malam Abu Bakar asked softly, standing at her side. The gesture had surprised everyone, but as he'd gruffly explained, every bride deserves a father figure to walk her down the aisle. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, weaving their story of paper cranes and midnight cookies, of astronomy lessons and healing hearts, of two broken families becoming something whole and beautiful. I promise, Tari said, his voice carrying across the hushed garden, to love not just with my heart but with my soul, to see magic in ordinary moments, to build dreams from paper and starlight, to be the kind of father both our children deserve. Hawa's eyes shimmered with tears as she responded, I promise to believe in wishes, to trust in second chances, to fill our home with laughter and love, to remember that family isn't about where we came from, but where we choose to go together. And we promise too. Aisha chimed in, making everyone laugh. She grabbed Kabiru's hand, pulling him forward. We promise to be the best brother and sister ever, and to always believe in magic, and to never stop making paper cranes. The minister smiled indulgently. I don't believe that's in the traditional ceremony, but I think we can make an exception. As Tari and Hawa exchanged rings, the garden lights twinkled overhead like earthbound stars, mixing with the paper cranes in a dance of light and shadow. The moment felt suspended in time. Perfect. Precious. Eternal. By the power vested in me, the minister proclaimed, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Their kiss was sweet and tender, full of promises and dreams. Around them, paper cranes swayed in the evening breeze, witnesses to this culmination of 1,000 wishes. The reception that followed was a celebration of everything their unique family had become. Tables were set with elegant simplicity, each centerpiece featuring a family photo surrounded by carefully folded paper cranes. The cake, a masterpiece of white and gold, was decorated with sugarcraft cranes that matched the ones hanging above. Miss Aminu dabbed at her eyes as she watched Kabiru attempt to teach Malam Abu Bakar a complicated handshake. Look at my grandson, she whispered to Jamila. Who would have thought he'd end up with a family like this? Jamila smiled, watching Aisha explain the constellations to her young cousins, using paper cranes to map out the stars. Love has its own wisdom, she said softly. Zainab would have loved all of this. Later, as music filled the garden, Tari held Hawa close during their first dance. Above them, paper cranes caught the light of 1,000 tiny bulbs, creating patterns like constellation maps across their faces. Happy? He murmured against her hair. Beyond words, she replied, then laughed as Aisha and Kabiru crashed into their dance, demanding to be included. Tari lifted Aisha while Hawa scooped up Kabiru, and they swayed together as a family, their shadows merging into one on the garden path. You know what this means? Aisha asked excitedly. Now we get to make 1,000 more cranes for new wishes. But sweetheart, Hawa smiled, what else could we possibly wish for? Aisha's face grew serious. Well, maybe a baby sister, one who likes astronomy and baking like us. Tari and Hawa exchanged startled glances, then burst out laughing. One miracle at a time, princess, Tari said, but his eyes held a promise when they met Hawa's. The party continued into the night, but eventually the newlyweds found a quiet moment by the fountain. The paper cranes above them cast moving shadows on the water like dreams taking flight. Do you remember? Tari asked. That first day I came home and found you by the pool with Aisha? How could I forget? I thought I was going to be fired. Instead, you fired up my heart, he touched her cheek gently. Taught me that love doesn't end with loss. It just changes shape and, like your paper cranes, becomes something new and beautiful. We all taught each other, Hawa said softly. Aisha with her endless belief in magic, Kabiru with his open heart, even Malam Abubakar learning to let go of the past. From across the garden came the sound of children's laughter. Aisha was teaching her cousins how to fold simple cranes, while Kabiru offered very serious commentary on their technique. Malam Abubakar and Miss Aminu sat nearby, united in grandparental pride. Our family, Tari marveled. All of it. The pain and the joy, the past and the future, folded together like paper cranes. Hawa finished, smiling. Each crease necessary, each fold bringing us closer to something magical. Above them, the real stars had emerged fully now, countless points of light in the velvet sky. They mingled with the paper cranes and garden lights until it was impossible to tell where earthly magic ended and celestial wonder began. Just as it should be, Hawa thought, because love, real love, knows no boundaries. It expands like the universe, infinite and beautiful, making room for all the stories that led to this moment and all the stories yet to come. Time to cut the cake, Aisha called out, running toward them with Kabiru in tow. And make new wishes. Tari pulled Hawa close, pressing a kiss to her temple. What do you say, Mrs. Tari? Ready for 1,000 more wishes? Hawa looked at their children, their family, their paper crane dreams come true. With you, always. And as they walked back to their celebration, hand in hand, the paper cranes seemed to glow a little brighter, as if acknowledging that some wishes don't need magic to come true. They just need love, courage, and hearts big enough to hold all the stars in the sky. The end.
This is African Romance Folktale. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this very captivating story. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so as to be notified whenever we upload a new video. Join our membership so you will always be the first to get notified whenever we make any uploads. And we've uploaded more romantic love stories, specially created for our membership subscribers only. Check the description box to join now so you don't miss out. Furthermore, please support us by using the super thanks icon in between remix and download icon down below. Lastly, rate this story in a scale of 1 to 10. And don't forget to tell me where you're watching this video from. I am going to see you in another video. Bye.